Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we start, I would like to draw your attention to my weekly email newsletter, Friday Focus. Each Friday, I focus on one topic with one action arising. The link to sign up is in the show notes, or head over to amyrowlandson.com and sign up right now. Today on Focus on Why, I am joined by Riccardo Sai. Welcome.
Hi, Amy. Hello, everybody.
How are you doing?
I'm very good. Very well.
Yeah, me too. So it says on your Zoom screen here, your name and your visual storyteller tags after it. So what is it you're focusing on, Riccardo?
Well, I focus on visuals and stories. And to be honest, this title is a bit of a work in progress because it's so difficult to define who I am in one word or two words. And I think at the moment, visual storytelling is probably what captures best who I am and what I do, but it's a work in progress, let's put it that way, because effectively I'm an artist, I'm a creative, I'm a visual storyteller, yes, I'm a director, I'm a photographer, I'm the founder of a visual storytelling studio, so I wear different hats. And I think somehow visual storyteller is probably what captures most of those hats, I think. But it's a bit of a work in progress. Stay tuned. I might change that in the next few weeks.
So tell me, what is it that you feel you need, or why do you feel the need to define yourself in one or two words?
It's just that I mean, stories is a very important element, and somehow it's something that I've been doing all my life as a hobby, as a job. So story was a very important element. Visual, it's I always been a very visual person, but at the same time, I work with audio and I love audio. I mean, all the composers that I used to work with in the past and at the moment as well, they get a lot of royalties with my films because I use a lot of music. I love audio and music. I find that really inspiring in terms of my visuals and the story that I'm telling. So a lot of time I start working with a sort of an audio soundscape before even I start thinking about the visuals. And sometimes it's the other way around. I start from images and then I come up with a soundscape that I like. So, yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your questions, but maybe I was kind of trying to explain a little bit more about visual storytelling and the two components on that.
What I love is that word soundscape, because instantly it takes me to landscape. And the soundscape is so key to, as you said, the filmmaking, because you have... without it, there's no intensity, there's no atmosphere, there's no drama. You watch anything on telly and with the sound down, nothing. Put the sound up, everything. It connects you. It's such a big thing. So maybe it's the connection that is key for you.
Yes, absolutely, Amy. Connection for me has always been a very important element of not only of my work, but also my purpose and why I'm doing things, any things that I do in life, really. And it's interesting because I'm nearly 50 and I've been thinking about my life, what I've done, and just thinking about, really, is there a sort of a fil rouge, something that connects all the dots, a thread that weaves all the things that I've done in my life, all the relationship that I had, all the films, the photos that I've done, all the projects that I've done in the past. And, so I still feel very young in many different ways, but, it's that kind of moment of my life where I'm thinking about the past, and I'm reaching a point where perhaps I've lived maybe half of my life or maybe more than that. So just really, I've been thinking in the last, I would say maybe a couple of years about what's really in it for Riccardo. And I think connections has been really, I would say, the foundation of a lot of the things that I've done in my life, a lot of the projects, experiences that I had, has been a major drive for me. So well spotted.
Well, with that, I'm wondering, has there ever been any disconnection?
Oh yeah, lots of disconnection. Is I mean, there's many times where I felt disconnected, and I think I felt disconnected by people. I felt disconnected by projects, but somehow I think the drive has always been the connection. And a lot of it, and that there has been different phases in my life where I felt really disconnected by myself, from myself. And, but in a way, acknowledging that and really getting deeper on that disconnection has been quite revealing, and a lot of time revealed something about myself, and has been a bit as if it was a story, just facing those obstacles and walls of disconnections with myself. It's always been a drive to actually climb that wall for me. And I love that. Of course, when you are there and you see this massive mountain in front of you, it's difficult to think that on the other side, actually, there might be sunshine. There might be a beautiful landscape that you were not even considering existing on the other side of the wall. But when you reach the top of the mountain, after you've been climbing step after step and sweat drops after sweat drops, and you get to the mountain, and as you can imagine, I grew up in the mountains, so mountains has always been an important symbol, in an important image in my life, and I've learned a lot from mountains, climbing mountains, and living in the mountains as well. So I've learned a lot about being disconnected. But I think I always been an optimist. I think I always had the feeling that there was a brighter side, and that even the darker side came to me for a reason, and to teach me something. I think I always had that. From quite earlier in my youth, I would say, I always had that kind of conviction.
And these lessons that you've sort of gleaned over the years from the mountains, what else has nature taught you?
Oh, nature. There's so much we can learn from nature, and so much that we should learn from nature. I think nature is really, we are nature in a way. So again, we're going back to that, exactly what I was saying before about the fact that we need to start from ourselves to first really understand who we are, how we operate, and in a way that there's not much difference from ourselves and nature. Nature is perfect as it is. Is perfection, is geometry. Recently, I've been with a very good friend of mine to Kew Gardens, and I spent the whole day taking photos of nature, of flowers, and it's something that is quite interesting because I've kind of never done before, but I allow myself to immerse myself in nature and really capturing those stories those incredible textures that are there, and they are microscopic. But if you're there and if you look at them, there's a whole world. The closer you get, the more immense they are. Those flowers, those buds, those plants. So to me, nature is a mentor in many ways, and so it's perfection, is geometry, it's change, it's dynamic change as well. I mean, I became Buddhist a few years ago, and I've learned so much from this philosophy, from this practice, and nature has always played a big part in my Buddhist practice as well. Again, this idea of being totally in unison with nature, but life is a dynamic change. Pantare, they used to say in the old days, and I think it was Heraclito who said that everything flows, tutto scorre in Italian, and everything flows, and I do think there's a place for terrible stories as well, and for beautiful stories, stories of change, stories of transformation in this planet and in our lives. So I always welcome when people share with me their sufferance and their incredible and challenging times that they experience, and I do feel somehow as a storyteller, and using the visual form of storyteller, a sort of a sense of duty in capturing those stories and sharing them with the world. And I think the world will be a better world if there were more transformative stories, stories of change, beautiful story, but also harrowing and tragic stories as well. I mean, because life it is what it is about, and I think that nature is exactly that. So it's a place. Where animals kill each other, and so that's horrible. But that's life. If animals didn't kill each other, didn't eat vegetables, there wouldn't be life. So it's kind of embracing that to me, and I think that to me is the biggest lesson from nature, that everything flows, everything changes, transform from one state to another one.
It's incredible, isn't it? And I posted last year, I'd been waiting for a particular magnolia to flower, and it took 12 years before it finally flowered. I'd moved it from a pot and planted it back into the earth, and it flowered. And those flowers were unbelievably gorgeous. They lasted 3 days. And it taught me such a big lesson of deferred gratification, to sort of appreciate what happens in the moment. Because again, as you say, change is the only constant in our world. I wanted to ask you about this beauty that you've touched on, and how important beauty is for you to recognize and bring into your work.
Beauty is very important for me, and it's interesting because somehow what is driving me is capturing beauty, and it doesn't mean creating beautiful images, beautiful stories, because I do believe there's beauty also in horror, in tragedies. It's exactly what I was saying before, because life is beautiful, and I think art, in a way, for me, it's a way of somehow understanding that inner beauty of life, seeing life as a beautiful thing, as a beautiful gift, and that's why I'm an artist, and I use creativity to really kind of capturing that beauty and translating that into stories, into images that can touch people. It's interesting because I've been thinking about my company, which is called Storo, which is based on the village where I grew up. Where my dad actually grew up in the north of Italy, and it's a village I'm really connected with at a very deeper level. And my family home is like hundreds of years ago, old, hundreds of years old. Their house, and it's full of incredible stories, but that's where my family roots are, and I do think it's somehow naming my company as a Storo. It's very meaningful for me.
So we were talking about how you were saying about beauty in horror and tragedies. You said life is beautiful. And then you sort of brought in why you've chosen the name Storo for your village. So I just want to ask you, because what you shared there is about your family roots. And we've been talking about nature. We've been talking about various elements here. But nature is in your language as well. You know, you've been talking about these metaphors of life, and it's beautiful.
Yeah. So beauty is very important to me, and I think it's interesting because in the past I was almost obsessed by capturing beautiful images, perfect images, well composed, and beautiful stories, But actually, the more I think about it, the more from quite early stage in my career, I always been fascinated by the dark side of it, of life. And again, I think is in a way it is part of the medium of photography and film, light and shadows. And in fact, when I studied at the University of Literature and Philosophy in Bologna years ago, a lifetime ago, when I graduated, I wrote an essay about exactly that, about light and shadows, because that even before I became a Buddhist. But I think to me, the fact that life is transformation and is a constant flux of shades, of shadow, of night and lights. You wouldn't have a photo if you didn't have light, and if you didn't have the sun, or if you couldn't recreate those kind of lighting effect with artificial lights, So so to me, the reason why I always been attracted by the film and photography is exactly that, because it's part of the medium, but it's even deeper than that. It really, there's a deeper connection with film and photography and what is life about. And I love the fact that the film captures 24, 25 photos in a second. So, and those photos, if you put them together, there is a dynamic change between, like a very small change between one photo and the following one. And together, they 24 of them, they make a second. And then, of course, you have 60 seconds of 25 frames, and together you have, if you put them together, eventually you have a film. But I think that's what is life about. Life is about images. It's about moving images. It's about scenes morphing with each other, and together. That's what is life about, and that's the creation of life. And so that's why I always been very fascinated by film and photography, and in a way, that's an incredible visual storytelling tool that allow people to connect at a very deeper level and very meaningful way, also with the essence of life. And the essence of life is beauty. I think kind of capturing that beauty has always been a major drive in what I do and why I do it as well. And from the beginning, I always been fascinated by the fact that, life is transformation, and life is a constant dynamic force moving from one scene to the following one, and that's beauty, And I had always been very fascinated by thrillers, by horror films as well, and I used to study them. And I've done a couple of documentaries about cancer as well. And my interest there was, in a way, to go beyond what was happening and kind of discovering, for example, the fact that in cancer there is also beauty. And there is life as well, something that I wasn't particularly aware of, because I always thought that cancer is such a horrible thing. Being dying is a horrible thing. Being sick is a horrible thing. But actually, it could be an opportunity to redefine and repurpose your life. So I'm always attracted by those kind of stories. And that's also why recently I decided to shift the focus of what I do and why I do. And I've changed the name of my company into Storo, which is the name of the village where I grew up. Where my family grew up, my dad in particular, a place where I'm really, really connected with. And the essence of what I do with my company, with my incredible team, is moving stories. So it's stories that move people. Movie stories also because they are dynamic. In many different ways. So they drive emotions, they drive change. And some of them are moving pictures, meaning that they are film. But, they could be also moving stories in a static form. So it could be photography, for example. It could be like all sorts of different visual tools that can be used. But they do move. And I think they inspire move. And they do move forward and not backward.
What I'm thinking here right now is I'm overwhelmed by the number of images that are in a film. That for me took me on a little bit of a squirrel moment where I calculated that in a 2-hour film you've got 172,000 or almost 173,000 images in that time. So that's amazing in itself. But the perfection, you mentioned it a couple of times. You said nature's perfection, and that it's with all its geometry and that you were really focused when you first started to put together these perfect, beautiful, well-composed images. What do you believe is it possible to achieve perfection?
I think perfection is in the making. It's a bit like happiness, I think. It's not like we're looking for heaven. We're looking for the happy place. We're looking for, when I retire, I will be happy because I can do what I really want. And somehow, I think in my life, I always been an old person, or maybe always been a young person. I don't know. So I always did what I liked. In a way, I'm very grateful of my parents that somehow, even though it wasn't easy for them, I think, but they really trusted me, and they knew that I was a creative person. I was an artist. So they supported me in that. So if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have been in London, in the UK, where I live now. So I'm forever grateful of that. But at the same time, I think I always lived in the moment. So I mean, I remember years ago, I used to have an allotment. It's one of those things that perhaps you would do when you retire. Well, when you retire, you got time, you got grandchildren, and why not having an allotment? Or I used to do all sorts of things that perhaps most people would consider doing when they are, in their 60s or 70s. And I've done them when I was in my 30s or 40s. And also, like doing what I do, I always felt, I mean, not all the time, but most of the time it felt like a hobby. And how many people have these luxury of consider their job a hobby. And it's exactly going back to what we were saying before about feeling disconnected. It's when I felt that my job wasn't a hobby anymore, that I understood that it was time for change. And that was the beginning of this new chapter in my life, which is really working with purpose-led businesses, ethical brands, and value-driven people, which is at the moment is what feels more close to my heart, I would say.
And it's really interesting because what I'm hearing here is a really strong message of don't defer happiness to retirement. It's possible, more than possible, to, if you focus on the purposeful and meaningful things in your life, that happiness ensues as naturally. Okay. So you talked about how adopting that mindset of an older person, a retired person, somebody who has achieved everything they've wanted to, and then they can live out as they desire. That's possible to do from now, from wherever you are, whatever point you are, that's possible. And it's having that shift in mindset to understand that. But it kind of came naturally, as you said. The mountains taught you the lessons of life and death and dark and light, and a beautiful essay on light and shadows, which I'd love to read, by the way. It's really, really interesting. What I would love to explore is what you just shared about purpose-led, ethical, value-driven. What's important to you about purpose?
Well, purpose is really everything, and it's interesting because it was only during the pandemic that I really, first of all, I never heard about purpose. I mean, yes, as a word, I knew about that before. I still struggle to translate that in Italian, which I still haven't found a way to translate it in Italian. So, but it's been an incredible discovery, and I think the fact that so many of us during the pandemic, which it was a few years ago actually, but it's still so present in many different ways. For me and for many people, I think it was quite a pivotal time where we started to think about the deeper meaning of life. And to me, in a way, that journey started years ago when, actually, I think it's 7 years ago that when I became Buddhist. So that was, the seed was already there, but I had to wait, as a lot of time it happens in stories, an obstacles, an external force that challenge you, and definitely the pandemic challenged me in many different beautiful and horrible way to change. And I had to wait until that to really understand what was my place on this planet, what was my purpose. And it's interesting because a lot of time before realizing what is your purpose, it's the same hero's journey that heroes go through during a story, during a film or a book. They need to leave what they know about life. They need to leave their home and start an adventure. And that adventure is dangerous, it's difficult. And they need to go through a forest. They need to meet dragons, giants, wolves, or any kind of horrible creatures that are trying to stop them to change and to learn something. And at the end, after they go through all that, they go back home. But home is different. It's a different home. It's the same. I mean, the shell is the same, but it's what is inside that is different. And it's exactly that journey that transformed you. And that journey has transformed me and gave me the biggest lesson is really that I found my purpose, which was again, it happened because I had to leave my home. I had to leave my comfort zone, and I had to leave everything behind, all the certainties, all the things that gave me comfort before, and come back as a new man, as a grown-up man in many different way. And that was my purpose. And at some point I felt that, and I really challenged, what is the purpose of images? What is the purpose of stories? What is the purpose of art? What is the purpose of creativity? So I really started to have deep conversation with myself about that, and realized that I wasn't ready to leave everything behind, because that was part of my DNA. So it was really part of who Riccardo Sai has always been. So I grew up that as that kind of person. So in a way, the pandemic really challenged me and really kind of opened my eyes, and I started to think about maybe my purpose is elsewhere. I couldn't find another meaningful where, and decided to stick with it, stick to stories, stick to images, but aligning myself and my values with other people and brands who understood that. So my purpose became and has become really supporting these brands and organizations who are on a purposeful and meaningful and ethical and sustainable journey, and help them to craft those stories in a more meaningful and moving way, so that they not become just stories or films or photos that are just there and they don't say really anything after a few weeks. But stories that can really stick with the audience, stick with people for a long time, and resonate with them at a very deep level. So that's my new purpose, and that's why it's so important for me. And it gave me hope. It gave me like a new, fresh approach to life. And in a way, I'm a happier person now.
Yeah, I love that. And what I want to pick up on is the difficulty you said about being able to translate it into Italian. You know, what does purpose mean? And I'm just wondering whether it's because it's the wrong word that you're trying to translate. So hear me out here. So purpose and the why are different. They're interconnected, but they're different. And the why is not something that you can find externally. It's found within, it's felt within, it's created from within. Purpose is the overarching intention that guides your direction in life. And it's whatever you choose that to be. But the why is the emotional significance that you assign to that purpose.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the why is providing you with your commitment and your focus to, and the drive, that natural drive that you've been speaking about. So with this journey of being a hero and exploring all of these challenges that you had, and recognizing that home was still home, but it was you that was different. It's because it was from the creation of what you've changed inside internally. That externally, it wasn't that you found anything there. It was from within. Does that help potentially with a translation into Italian?
Oh, I don't know. So, it's interesting because I've been living here for more than 20 years, and there's but there are, I was having some conversation with some friends of mine who've been doing very well in their lives, and they have leadership roles in companies, etc. And it's interesting because a lot of them, they use actually English words. So somehow I think English has got this beauty in itself as a language in capturing in a single word a much bigger meaning. But I find it really fascinating to kind of move from one language to the other one. But at the same time, English is somehow, I find easier to talk about what we've just been talking about until now in English than in Italian. So, but at the same time, I like to challenge myself to kind of have this conversation in Italian. So maybe we can do another one in Italian, but you need to learn Italian. Otherwise,
I do. And I'm just thinking back to what you've shared has revolved around a lot of reflection out of all of the thinking that you had, where you were translating, what was going on with your life, and you spent the last 2 years really understanding more about what's in it for you. And from this reflection, has created subsequent action. And that's what I talk about all the time, reflection with action. And the why emerges from the reflection, and the purpose is created through your action. Okay, so that's the connection between those two elements. And interpreting your inner world and understanding the meaning of those experiences, because we can choose to ascribe any meaning to any moments. Just as you shared, there is beauty to be found in moments of darkness, as in the cancer. It helps you to redefine what's important, what's really, as you said, the essence of life. And that in doing so, you do become aware of how to capture the beauty around you. And I think that's the thing. Often these big catalysts and death or near-death experiences, serious illness, all act as a catalyst to understand what really matters.
I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. You're supporting the brands and helping them to understand how to articulate what they're doing in a moving and meaningful way. What's that going to allow them to do going forward?
There's been a lot of debate in the advertising and marketing and branding world in the last few years, especially when facing some of the major changes that are happening at the moment. You know, all sorts of crises, as we know, wars and climate challenges as well. And I think brands are facing an ethical dilemma, which is it right to sell products that people don't need? I think that's quintessentially is what a lot of brands are struggling with. And I do think, going back to what we were saying before, that beauty is it's important to feel good about yourself, to have a nice dress, to have a nice holiday, to have a nice camera, and even the act of gifting something to someone that has meaning for that person. It's got values, and it's very important. So I think it's important to buy things and to gift people something. So, and owning something, it's important. Even though even that concept of owning something has been challenged. You know, so if you think about Spotify or the streaming platforms, you don't own the VHS or the CD anymore. You know, so it's about the experience of listening, of watching a film. But at the same time, there's even more importance these days of feeling together, to being in the same cinema together. And there's a lot of interest in what I call the immersive experiences, because people want to feel with their five senses something. You know, we're craving for experience, to feel something. And so I think brands are facing quite an important and challenging time, and a lot of big global advertising agencies are really struggling and closing down as well. For, you know, it's a very long conversation, and of course artificial intelligence is part of their transformation as well. But I think it's a defining moment, I think, where I think it's a time where customers are not customers anymore, are citizens, are people, are humans, and they start asking questions, and they feel they have agency, and they have a purpose, and their purpose is also deciding if they want to buy something or not. So they're not just consumer; they're just humans with a brain, and they know that they in that kind of awareness, there is meaning, there is purpose, and there is also a political power as well. So the brands that I think are doing well and they are loved by people are the brands that understand that, I think. So there are brands who care about the planet. There are brands who care about humans, and they're not just greedy bastards just after the money, And I think that has been important in a certain time, a few decades ago, perhaps, but definitely now things are different, and the scenario is completely different. So I see the role of advertising and people like myself is working with people and with brands and organizations who are perhaps already on that journey, who have going through transformation, who are understanding more and more the importance of these kind of conversations, or perhaps even brands and organizations who are quite earlier on, and they understand the power of creativity and people like me to make them see things in a slightly different way, and communicate in a different way, and use stories in a different way, and connecting with the audience, or with the customers, or with humans, as I prefer to call them, in a different and more meaningful way. So, and helping them in that kind of transformation, one film at a time, one piece of communication at the time, because I think even a 30-second ad, or even a 2 minutes film, can really have a meaningful impact. And I think it's a time where we need to start really shifting that and embracing that in a more meaningful way.
I couldn't agree more. And this shift of consumption to contribution is huge, and the responsibilities that companies have to the planet, to the sustainable future of the planet, is huge. And every decision that a company makes matters in terms of if they are authentically leading through collaboration and through contribution. They are responsible not only for changing the nature of how business is conducted, but for changing nature itself. And it is a huge responsibility, but also an opportunity. And it is led by citizens. It is led by us. As long as we don't get swept up with the elements of bigger, faster, shinier, newer, it's really, again, focusing on what really matters. So any company or individual who has heard what you've just said, how would they be able to say, Riccardo's the person to come and work with me and my company?
I wish I had a magic wand, I think for me, it's, if you mean like, how do they get in touch with me? That's easy. They can engage on the conversation that I have, mainly on LinkedIn. LinkedIn for me, it's a place. We at least in Italy, I don't know in England, but in Italy, people used to go in squares, and they used to go to the market. They used to have conversations in the square. I think social media, and in particular LinkedIn, which I really like, it's a place where people can have conversations online, but I think it's quite a wonderful tool to have those kind of conversations. So everything starts with conversation. So I would say start a conversation with me. Just connect with me on LinkedIn, and you can find me as Riccardo Sai with double C, and just let's start engaging on some meaningful conversation and see if we can collaborate on projects and with in a more meaningful and impactful way, I would say.
Well, not only have you just shifted my entire image of what LinkedIn is now, so every time I'm now going to post on LinkedIn, I'm going to feel like I've just walked into this beautiful piazza and we're surrounded by history and knowledge and wisdom and beauty. And that's just transformed my sort of stepping in onto social media. So thank you for that image. I love that. Really, really do. But also I've loved this conversation. It really has been a a captivating, beautiful conversation. And there's been some really lovely, vulnerable moments. There's been so many different areas that I'm going to be reflecting on and taking action as a result. So thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. It really has been a very, very pleasurable, this conversation. Tell me, have you got some final words for the listener, please, Riccardo?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Amy. I mean, what you're doing is incredible. You are an incredible person, an incredible human, and what you're doing, it's incredible. I mean, sharing those stories and giving an opportunity for so many people to shine and to share their stories, and I think is really touches a lot of people's hearts, I think, and I think that's incredible. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I'm hoping I'm talking for other people as well, because you've done hundreds of these conversations. You started hundreds of these conversations with people, and that's incredible in itself. I think for me, any final words? Difficult. Really embrace your beauty, and embrace your perfection. Look at nature, and when you see a beautiful flower, when you see the sunset, when you look at the sea, when you go underwater and you see the beauty of the world under the water, when you see the waves, when you see the birds flying, when you hear the sounds of nature, I mean, just think about that. That's actually you. You are that already. So it's sometimes it's easier to look at beauty outside of you. It's easier to look at all these and to listen to the sound of nature. And oh, that's beautiful. I love nature, which is absolutely true. But at the same time, all that is inside and outside of you. And I think, I think we need to become more aware of that, and starting from ourselves, and also looking at the beauty around the corner. It could be our neighbor, it could be a family member, our spouse, our children, and children can be challenging and can be horrible, but they are beautiful. So I think sometimes it's easy to use like a wide angle lens and look at the beauty of the landscape, at the beauty of the planet seen from the space, but also just use a macro lens and just look at the beauty of the skin, look at the beauty of that beetle on the flower, just crawling on top of the flower. So it just constantly having that shift of perspective. And I think creativity, stories, films, they help you to do that. They keep shifting the lens of how you see the life and your experience on planet Earth. So hopefully it means something to someone. It definitely resonates with me.
How has this conversation had an impact on you? What value have you received from tuning in? What are your reflections with actions? Please take a moment to leave me an Apple Podcast or Spotify review sharing how Focus on Why has made a difference to you today. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. To keep it going, simply connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook or Twitter, or join the Focus on Why Facebook group. All the links are in the show notes. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.